Prince Andrew, furious. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. It is common for there to be plenty of narcissists in the monarchy. Why? Well, going back when royal families were established, invariably the one that was able to clamber to the top of the tree and stay there, despite the attempts of other people to dethrone them, and to ensure that they united a tribe and then other tribes, invariably was a narcissist. And then thereafter, it was necessary, of course, for that narcissist to secure their legacy by ensuring that there was a male heir. And there was a very good chance, of course, that as a consequence of the marriage contract, which wasn't about love, but was about the extension of the dynasty, the protection of property, and the continuance of a royal house, that two narcissists could be brought together in matrimony, more or less guaranteeing, unless there was some slight quirk of fate, that the genetic predisposition would be passed on. Even if that narcissist happened to marry an empath or a normal, there was a very good chance that the genetic predisposition would still be passed on to the heirs. And of course, the heir, particularly the immediate heir to the throne, would find themselves invariably in a lack of control environment, removed from their parents for the most part, living apart from them, having a governess or a nanny, being brought up with people basically bowing to them, having to respect a small child, a small boy. Who could thrive in such an environment of rigidity? All of those people having to acquiesce to the little boy's whim, but also telling him that he must behave this way and do this, that he must learn about these things as he was prepared for kingship. A lack of controlled environment, albeit a privileged one. And thus, narcissist produced another narcissist, that produced another narcissist. And then, of course, the spare, riven by envy at not being the preferred one, may also then find that their treatment, perhaps neglect, shunted off to go to the monastery to become a man of learning there instead, also becomes a narcissist, having that lack of control environment. So it's unsurprising that the ruling class, that was the monarchy, became festooned with narcissists. It's something I may examine in greater detail, but that's a short and useful summary of why so many would end up within royal families. And of course, I've explained King Charles is one. We know that before him, Prince Philip was one. I've explained, of course, how Prince Andrew is one. And the Duke of York, having analysed him with regard to his previous behaviours to establish that he's a narcissist and continue to demonstrate those behaviours vis-a-vis that ridiculous television interview that he undertook in relation to the allegations that he'd been involved in the sexual abuse of young women, where he actually thought it went well and demonstrated much of his narcissism, and behaviours thereafter, behaving with a sense of entitlement and tantruming in the way that he's had to be dealt with as a consequence of his general withdrawal and exclusion from public life. And it continues for him, because, as the Times reports in an article by Dominic Kennedy, Prince Andrew furious after losing his police protection. The Duke of York is expected to lose his police protection 3 years after being stripped of royal duties. Prince Andrew's bodyguards are to be withdrawn as the King has made clear that there can be no return to the front line of public life after the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Accordingly, Charles, to manage his own facade and that of the royal family as a whole, the institution, has decided that Andrew cannot return to public life because, of course, that would amount to a threat to control for Charles. He doesn't see it as a threat to control of itself, but that's what it represents. And therefore, he asserts control over his brother by saying, no, you're not coming back to public life. And, of course, with that comes the withdrawal of security. The article continues. Andrew is planning to complain to ministers and Scotland Yard about the loss of his security, which in effect is a form of pity play and an attempt to nullify the threat to control posed by this loss of security. The loss of security for him is a threat to control on two fronts. First of all, the possibility that someone might take exception to him and have a go at him, physically threatening him in some form. Furthermore, it's associated with a loss of status, that now he hasn't got PC Plod covering his back. It signals that he's not as important as he once believed that he was, and therefore that threat to his status is another threat to control. And therefore the removal of security is a double threat to his control, and therefore his narcissism needs to deal with it, hence the plan to complain. The dispute echoes the Duke of Sussex's frustration over the withdrawal of automatic police bodyguards when he and his family visit Britain. Andrew was said to be furious, ignition of fury as a consequence of threat to control, that he would no longer be escorted by police guards whenever he left the grounds of Windsor Castle. His round-the-clock protection has been estimated to cost between £500,000 and £3 million per year. He lost his military affiliations and royal patronages in January, when he failed in his attempt to quash a civil lawsuit in the United States brought by Virginia Giuffre, who claimed to have been forced to have sex with him. He also lost his right to be addressed officially as His Royal Highness, which again, of course, is another threat to control linked to the loss of status. Andrew made an out-of-court settlement in February with Giuffre, who has said she was Epstein's sex slave. The prince has consistently denied any wrongdoing. Denial, first assertion of control, or rather first line of defence of the twin lines of the narcissistic defence. Removal of security, threat to control, ignites fury. He doesn't operate with a facade, and therefore what you see is what you get with Andrew. He withdrew largely from public life because his narcissism ultimately recognised that that was what was necessary in order to gain the control and protect other privileges, for instance, his late mother bailing him out financially. But now the pressure mounts again as King Charles, asserting his own form of control, both in terms of his own personal interests and that of the monarchy, which is an extension of himself, of course, as king, results in this loss of security. What are the observations below the line, briefly? Does he engender any sympathy from those? Zaphod Beeblebrox, brilliant. His ego depends on having a protection team at his beck and call. Well, partially right. His narcissism depends on that because it makes him feel important and enables him to boss people around and triangulate people to say, I'm important, look, I have a protection team. Making him seem important wherever he goes, in his mind, but a massive inconvenience and expense to anyone else. If he's that worried, then he can pay for some unarmed private security. MarkLeach.com. Oh, he'll manage. I mean, it's not like he hasn't managed without them before, is it? His police protection officers were listed as missing persons when he visited a certain Pizza Express in Woking some time ago. On that occasion, their absence cost him £12 million, not to mention having to fork out for the cost of the pizzas, so he can clearly afford to pay for his own protection. No sweat. Very funny. Mr. Colin Lambert. Words associated with the prince. Private jets, golf, horse riding in Windsor Great Park. Entitlement. Words not associated with the prince. Self-knowledge, volunteering and downsizing. Graham Lockie. Bit like his ginger nephew. Big angry countryman. Another word he does not know is humility. And one he does know is arrogance. And of course, these people are describing the behaviours of a narcissist without actually mentioning that word, showing his sense of entitlement to engage in certain practices irrespective of the cost and how it looks. He doesn't care, because he's Prince Andrew and he's better than all of us. In his mind, of course. I Am Boris Johnson writes, if you can afford to give $12 million to someone you never met for something you never did, then you can afford to pay for your own security, mate. Grumpledore, he is a disgrace and he doesn't perform any public duty, so just gets on with life and don't expect the taxpayers to foot the bill for his security arrangement. Peter Taylor, what an ego. No one cares, Andrew. If anyone sees you on the street, they're more likely to avoid you rather than hassle you. You no more need coppers around you than I do. BBB, there'll be a lot of relief close protection officers. Peddler, indeed there will be. On YouTube, search for Prince Andrew Royal Protection Officer interview. All about Bucks. The last I heard, it was other people who needed protecting from him. Accordingly, people have the measure of him, identifying his sense of entitlement, rampant arrogance, his lack of accountability for his behaviours, and have no sympathy for him whatsoever. So whilst he gets furious as a consequence of this threat to control, and seeks to do something about it by complaining, which is his attempt to nullify that threat to control, certainly the public are affording him zero sympathy. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.